Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is David Kuhn. Was with SSROC and Hazel and I. We had a bit of fun with this presentation. It's nice to do a retrospective. We're going over 5 years of our work trying to inlay reuse systems, data collection, working with the sector, working with procurement, and of course our 11 councils. So we're really lightly going to touch on a lot of the projects, all the projects that we've done. If we had a half hour, we would talk more deeply on them. So just catch us at the break if you'd like to hear more. So SSROC is... So in this context, we're talking about the 2013 to 2021. All ROCs and regional organizations, regional waste groups have a waste strategy. We worked on that quite diligently with our councils and the EPA. We represented, before amalgamation, 16 councils. Today it's 11, 1.8 million residents, quite densely populated, and represent, we generate 40% of domestic waste in New South Wales, for New South Wales. We had 6 themes under our strategy, but one of the key things, as most strategies do, but the key thing for us was we embedded this sort of layer of responsible citizenship through all the themes. So we'll come back to that. So with most mapping projects, you need a key. So we developed this little key. So for us, the pathway is the critical path. That was what linked coordinators with our councils through the strategy. The blue boxes will be key projects that often unlock new insights, new data, new directions. The green arrows are sort of side projects, side paths that we found ourselves on, always chosen with a purpose. And the gray circles are unforeseen barriers brought on by new intelligence or constraints. So we started with data, which I think is a good thing to do. We needed to sort of pull together all the different strings of conversations about reuse and creating that business case for reuse. So we started with the strategy, technical components. We had a key piece of social research, which was collecting attitudes and behaviors for residents towards unwanted household items and problem waste. And we had the bulky waste audit for 12 councils. So these pieces of research were great for us. They gave us a roadmap. The social research gave us a lot of the attitudes, for instance, community willingness to drive, to reuse, or to purchase secondhand. The audit gave us sort of demystified what was on the curb at our 12 councils and gave us a quantum and segregation of materials in the cleanup stream. So we're starting to find our way. So with those pieces of data and some desktop research into existing business cases for reuse, we held a workshop with our councils, 9 councils attending. It turned out to be a pretty critical piece of the puzzle for us. But 2 clear outcomes. One was councils wanted us to standardize our existing arrangements with the Bower, so not ours, but council's arrangements with the Bower. That's a reuse repair center out of Merrickville. So SSROC hosted a master supply agreement. We worked under those conditions, came up with a gold, silver, bronze service package for councils that they could choose and sort of adapt to their needs. And that worked out quite well for the Bower. It streamlined the administration and communications by having SSROC in place to facilitate. Worked out for councils because they were able to pick and choose what they needed. And it worked pretty well. That was a 3-year contract. At the same time, we also managed a request for proposals, and it has a long name, but it was really trying to get the market to give us some solutions, how they can provide opportunities, new systems, new technologies that would meet our council's needs from a regional perspective. And around this time, the EPA also stepped in and held a very productive roundtable with sector professionals, procurement professionals, and local councils. So that was really sort of consolidating or sort of bringing up some really key conversations for the reuse sector. But with the request for proposals, the outcome was that the market was not able to, I suppose, meet the region's needs in a nutshell. One of the key learnings for us in that was that our councils couldn't come up with a unified approach to whether they wanted the deep green of reuse and avoidance and education and repair versus sort of a suite of better diversion practices. So we had a lot of internal debate about that, and we couldn't come up with a unified response, so it was difficult for us to proceed with one of the proposals. But that led us to an unexpected direction that Hazel's going to talk about.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I'll just give you that one. I love the way this journey's going for us. There's lots of over here, over there. So those of you who know me know I like using the whiteboard and scribbling things down and connecting it all. After the RFP process, Dave and I stood at the whiteboard and we had a think, we scratched our head, and we still had these strategic objectives. And we came to a little bit of a light bulb moment, because we thought we still want to be having the reuse sector's presence in Sydney to be able to respond to council procurements. But at the same time, we looked at, well, what do we control? Where can we influence change in terms of, as is often the way, is local government procurement? So I'll first talk about supporting the growth in the region. Of course, we're sitting there in our SSROC office. What we first needed to do was ask those working in the reuse sector if they wanted a Sydney presence and a stronger network. You see some of the other agencies involved with that conversation that we'd like to acknowledge here. And wonderfully, the answer was yes. So 2016 was about establishing the Zero Waste Network in Sydney through a funding agreement with SSROC. And again, we've worked with social traders there. The EPA were involved and launched at the end of that year, just before Christmas, I think. The thing that's most exciting from my perspective that's come out of that, and I understand Matt talked about this a little bit yesterday, was doing the impact measurement tool. So one of the challenges that Dave had touched on and the EPA had spoken to regional coordinators about was this challenge of not being able to measure the impact of reuse in a way that worked within the government. So the impact measurement tool has gone out and done that for the first time with some indices that then can be used to measure the impact of reuse, which is a fantastic piece of work Zero Waste Network have done. Back on I can't remember what we're calling it, the main pathway, the superhighway of council control, was starting to look at what we could do with our clean-up processing. We also, within that, had a little look at what we called a cream-off potential. The nature of the busyness with councils at the time and so much going on for us, that was just parked for the time being. So with those two paths, I'm now going to jump back onto the green one with our sector-facing work. Bearing in mind we're looking to grow a sector's presence and their capability of working with local government and the way we do things. So we did a workshop around how to win work and deal with the council tendering, again in collaboration. We did some further investment and working with the Bower. One of the issues the sector talks to local government about is the need to have residents taking from the reuse sector, not just putting into it. So we did some work on the online presence for the Bower, for them to then test and model which materials and item types they could sell online and shift that way, not just through the hard reality of the store. We also, I see Ian's in the room, was in the room. We also paused. We're particularly keen and inspired by what's happened in Auckland, but we kind of, maybe it's our overexcitement, was we overexcited, and how quickly we might go there in the Sydney region. The reality was we've still got more work to do. We don't own the facilities that we can turn into such a centre, but that doesn't mean we're off that pathway. So again, our subheading there is Community Council Reuse Sector. Dave touched at the start on our responsible citizenship theme we have through our strategy, and by responsible citizenship we mean everybody kind of lives and works through the waste hierarchy and does as we would hope they would do. So our first piece there is the community-facing, linked to the clean-up stream and our digital marketing campaign about how to use the clean-up correctly. All our councils have a variety of booked and scheduled, different mix and match of those. But tightly with that was interwoven all the reuse opportunities to encourage our residents to first think about reuse before putting it out on the curb. We also have a lovely small team of educators who work with existing community groups on various aspects of behaviour change. And we introduced this section for them of working with residents and teaching them how to, for those who needed teaching how to do it, how to use some of those digital platforms to be able to be purchasing or taking from the reuse sector. With our councils internally, we looked at fleet modelling and some of the costs and financial implications of changing the fleet structure. Interesting exercise, lots of complexity, but we've got there and got the work done. The most recent piece on this, and now we're up to 2018, which is this year, we commissioned ISF to do some primary research, well, first desktop and then some primary research. Because this thing about, we've talked about data and the ability of a sector to work at all points, we actually really didn't know the strategic planning of the sector over the next 3 to 5 years to see where they may be able to take more materials from a local government. So that's primarily what that piece of work was about. It does say regional capacity is limited, but there's a lot more nuances in that. There are some of the major players that do have capacity, but some boundaries or hurdles that will need addressing, which I'll come to. So it's the time of year we've been doing our next year's action planning. We've got the tender that will be coming up. And we've been, like other councils, behind the LG New South Wales campaign around the levy hypothecation. And again, part of that is infrastructure and needs for this sector for reuse and waste avoidance. The piece of work I just mentioned, the research that ISF did, the primary research, I'm planning to pull those representatives from the sector together to work with them together to unpack the recommendations that ISF get. Sorry, those of you not in Sydney, the Institute of Sustainable Futures at UTS gave us a number of recommendations which were really interesting from a systems thinking perspective. So I want to unpack with the reuse sector and those social enterprises what exactly we need to do to change to address some of those. We've also thrown in a little campaign, some resources for councils to be able to run local reuse campaigns. And I think I'll pass back over to Dave. Thank you.
Thanks. So there's the map, and it's, I think of it as like lots of spinning, and then it kind of, after the spinning stopped, you have this sort of map that's left with the divergent paths, new insights and directions. But it really exposed a key truth, and that the two sectors, reuse sector and local government, are driven quite differently. So for social enterprises, of course, it's a labor of love. Reuse and recovery is the vehicle. Jobs creation is a vehicle. Also, that local government tendering processes are quite burdensome and quite expensive for the sector. So that was an internal one that we were looking at doing ourselves and working with councils on social procurement activities, driving that policy. For local government, it's about services and efficiencies. It's about resource recovery outcomes. Service delivery, safety, and street amenity are the vehicles. So they're quite different, and it's about really working with each other and understanding each other's drivers if we're going to sort of be on the same path. And meanwhile, the community has the appetite for more opportunities. So online is growing, of course, but it only works for some people with a certain amount of diligence and for some materials. But what the community has told us in the various pieces of research is that once they know the fate of the waste that it ends up in landfill, they are more inclined to change their behaviors, particularly in terms of recycling and cleanup behaviors. So this is what we're faced with. You know what this is. It was sort of the vision of couldn't we professionalize a sorting center where this stuff can be brought back, triaged, sorted, and redistributed, and that's what Auckland has done. I was lucky to go and visit those guys, so that's Auckland Council working with the waste service provider and Zero Waste Network New Zealand to sort this stuff and redistribute it back through the reuse retail economy. Still in the vision. So the path to reuse is not linear, and that key piece too is that data speaks. So Matt Allen brought up yesterday the Zero Waste Network impact measurement tool, and when he's talking about we need to be refocusing on a labor-intensive economy. Where we are now is capital intensive, and that shift needs to happen. So what are we actually talking about? So the tool is about getting behind that. It was, I think he said, 195 jobs created per 10,000 tons in reuse. So decarbonization, again, what are we talking about? And the tool is getting after that, a 20-fold increase in real jobs. So the Zero Waste Network, we're proud to say, are trying to close that gap in this understanding. We got a long way to go to make reuse normal. We still need facilities, particularly in the city. We're really struggling to scratch out space. We need to shift societies and systems. We need government at all levels to be investing and thinking really quite clearly about this. And the sector needs to grow and be incentivized to grow. So that's investment, but it's about councils working with the sector to make that chance possible. And of course, procurement processes are involved. So in sum, all of this work indicates that the reuse sector is already contributing to the circular economy. They're often mini models, and we need to really be enabling that. And so a professionalized reuse sector needs to be a key part of the 20-year strategy. So attention to EPA. Thanks, and take any questions if we have time.